Good morning, everybody. This is Dee Reinhardt with Illinois WorkNet. We are going to be talking about tough interview questions. So are you tough enough to be able to answer those tough interview questions? Let's move forward. How will you get to the welcome aboard handshake? And that's the most important question. It's, are you going to be able to answer all of the interview questions the right way? Will you be able to think quickly on your feet, and will you be able to give intelligent and thought out answers? Sometimes you can prepare for questions, sometimes you are not able to. So a couple of the things that we think are easy questions that you should definitely have underway is, tell me about yourself. That's like the number one question that everybody asks. They're going to ask you, what are your strengths and weaknesses? If you can turn a weakness into a strength or vice versa, then you have it even better under control. What are some projects you've completed? They're going to want to know some details. Why should we hire you? That's a pretty much standard question. You're going to point out all your good points. And do you have any questions for us? Please, please, please have a question. If nothing else, about what it is that the company is planning to do moving forward. It will show them that you've done some research. All right, now that those easy questions are out of the way, we're going to move on to, are you tough enough for the hard questions? And those hard questions are what we're going to talk about right now. There's a question in the chat pod. Can you ask them what the main tasks are in the vocation? You should have probably already found that out from the job description, but you can ask them what their primary focus would be. All right, so let's get rolling. I read an article, and the link is at the bottom of the slide here, so if you want to read all of them, you can do that and read them in context. The question is, if I called your manager and asked what one thing irritated them about you, what would they say? So this question is kind of tricky because you don't know, well, what should you really answer? But here's what the article read. This question will instantly throw a candidate off because they probably haven't thought about it before. You know, you haven't really thought about what irritated somebody else. So now that you're being asked that, it's going to make it a little bit iffy. So all they're asking you is, what's your biggest weakness? And it's a question, if you think about it that way, that you should definitely be familiar. The secret to answering that question is making it relevant, and relevant to the role for which you're interviewing. For example, if you're interviewing for a role as a physician's assistant or a personal assistant, and you told me that your boss hated how messy your desk could get, that's not going to make a good impression. First of all, as a personal assistant, you need to be organized. And second, because a cluttered desk means you might miss something. So if you're asking that question, or if you're being asked that question, you need to try and think of a positive way that you can mask that negative and turn it into something that adds value. So, for example, instead of having a messy desk, how about saying that your previous employer found it really annoying how much of a stickler for timekeeping you were, and you'd always be on their case about it. As a personal assistant, this is exactly what that boss needs. So although being constantly reminded might irritate that person, it will show them that you have what it takes to keep that person in line. So that's a really good example. Let's move on to the next one. What was your claim to fame in your previous role? So as we're looking at this one, in other words, what that one's asking you is, what are your strengths? They want to know, if they're asking you this question, what you excelled at in your previous role. What would your previous colleagues tell you that you were known for? give some examples of character building. For example, if you told that interviewer that you were known for organizing the best staff social events, immediately I would think that you were fun to work with, a good team player, and you understand the importance of culture in the workplace. Or perhaps you're best known for putting in the hours and staying behind at work to complete a task. If so, this shows that you're committed to delivering the best possible work and you're not scared to get stuck in and go over and above what's expected. Everybody wants to know that you're going to be going over and above. They're afraid that you're not going to do enough. So if you can tell them what you did, it'll be great for you. Let's move on to the next question. Oh, sure. Chelsea says, let's hear some examples. Do you have a claim to fame in your last or current job? And while you're typing that, I'm going to go on and put the next question up. Now, I also asked a number of my contacts, oh, how would you answer that as a student? If you were a student and you were going to do your claim to fame, it may be what projects you worked on as a team. Maybe you were doing a new program. Maybe you're a career changer and you were doing a new program. There's always going to be some projects that you work on in your senior year or in your final semesters, and you would want to add that information. If you are a high school student, what did you do in addition to your schoolwork? Maybe some community service work. Maybe it was something that you did over and above what was required of you during your school hours. So let's see here. Our next question is, what gives you stress at work? Now, this was a question that came from a local recruiter that I know. And she said that the reason she asks this question is because it tells her a story about if the person is going to make it in the environment in which they're interviewing for that job. It also helps Christine define what that person's idea of stressful really is. Stress is different to different people. Maybe having the copier run out of paper is stressful to you, where it's just the copier is totally broken and you're not going to have it for 3 days is stressful to somebody else. There's a difference in what gives you stress, and an interviewer knowing that makes it very much easier for whether or not they'll be able to place you in a position. So let's go on to the next question. If at any point in time you want to share your answer to any of these questions, please feel free to type those into the chat pod. Now, here's the good question. Why do you want to work here? What that does for the interviewer is it tells them a lot of things. But most of all, it tells them how much the candidate knows about the company. It shows whether or not they did the research about the company prior to applying. We talk about all the time making sure that you do your research on the company. Find out as much as you can about company culture. Find out about where they're going. Find out about whether or not you think it might be a good fit for you. In some cases, that's going to LinkedIn and talking to or messaging back and forth with some of the former employees to find out why they left. So if you have a really good idea of what that company is all about, you'll be very easily able to answer that why do you want to work here. Let's go on to the next question. I see a couple people typing, but we'll catch that. All right, from one of my recruiter friends, he's a senior recruiter for IT. How would your friends and colleagues describe you? Please give examples. This is very similar to that question earlier. What would your colleagues say irritated you or irritated them about you? But again, you need to know, well, what kind of a relationship did you have with your friends and colleagues? This way, the candidate, if the candidate says that a manager called them a team player, you can always ask a follow-up question, well, why did they say that? Or give me an example about how you were a team player. That's a great way for the interviewer to move forward and deeper into the conversation. All right, so let's move on. Our next question is, what is your best life lesson? This can be really deep or it can be really simple. Best life lessons may come from a place deep within your heart or your soul. And what did you learn? And maybe it's something tragic that you may not want to really go into, but how can you turn that life lesson into something that you can share? And Dana told me that the reason that she asks this question is to see how deep the person, the interviewee, will go. Will they take a chance to be vulnerable or not? It's always a good idea to filter what you think you'll say. Oh, goodness, do I have a life lesson to share? I would say my life lesson is to always pay attention to what people are saying to me. Listen more than I speak, because of the fact that there have been times where I thought I knew what the person was going to say, and I really didn't know. And so just listening and making sure that I communicate back to the person what it is that they're trying to say to me. And I learned that pretty early on, so I've been using that for the past probably 30 years of my life. And Todd mentioned we are all different and affected differently by the varied systems in which we live, and that's a really good example too. So think about some of these things and be prepared. Maybe they aren't going to ask you that question, but then maybe they will. So let's go on to the next question. And this one is, if you had a magic wand and could have any job, what would it be? Now, this came from that article as well. And my favorite job, my magic wand job, would be that I would be an international photographer of golf courses. Now, it has nothing to do with anything else. But if you think about the way that they're asking the question, you want to know, that interviewer wants to know what is going on in your brain. This person uses this at every interview and always surprised at the reaction that it receives. Now, in general, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you answer that question with something in the same or similar industry or role for which you're applying. Just like I said, I'd want to be an international photographer of golf courses. It's way off topic. So maybe instead what I would want to be would be a national or international speaker on social media. That would be more within the range of what I'm doing. You want to try to be a little witty, depending on the interviewer. You always got to feel that out to see what kind of attitude or type of personality that person is. But in most cases, it's always best to be relevant or at least give a good reason why you chose that particular career path if it's something way off base. So if somebody wants to be a rapper, like Chelsea, she may have to think, well, I want to be a rapper about workforce development and help kids learn more about how they can make their careers better. Would that work for you, Chelsea? All right. Employers don't like the thought of candidates applying for roles they're not passionate about. So if you can't illustrate this, you're immediately at a disadvantage. take this one, for example. This gentleman was interviewing a finance manager who once told them that he wanted to be a professional wrestler. That's great, but how is that going to impact the business's finances? Well, unless the professional wrestler won a lot of money and donated it to the business, like that one movie that was out about the music department, it might not help at all. So don't make that same mistake. Your interviewer is looking for reasons to hire you and not really sure that wrestling is going to help you clinch the deal. All right, let's go on to the next question. Now, this one came from one of my local contacts, and it's, what do you know about this company? Now, we kind of talked about that earlier, is why do you want to work for this company? But they may phrase it in a different form or fashion. So what do you know about this company gives the person that's asking you the question information about whether or not you did your homework. Michelle wants to know, are you lazy or do you just not care? Did you take the 5, 10, 15 minutes that it could take you to look up about the company so that you could answer the question and find out how your background might assist that company in what they do and how you might help them move forward? So you always want to make sure that you're doing that homework and be on the ready to be able to answer this question. Todd says he always Googles the company before he goes to the interview. What if you can't find information about the company? You can go to the library. There is a couple of programs that the libraries have that will have information about every company that there is on the Secretary of State's registry for the business. The one thing that would help you, especially if you can't find anything on the internet about the company, you may have to call the company and ask a receptionist, how can I find out a little bit more about your company? At least you will have done the research, and then they'll know that you've done that. There's a whole lot of people, Michelle says there's a whole lot of people that don't know anything and give lame excuses about why they don't know it. All right, next question. We're about halfway done here. Now this one, oh my goodness, my computer is not helping me. On a scale of 0 to 10, what would you say your level of experience is with Excel? Now, Nancy, a lot of the people that Nancy hires work with Excel, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be the only program that they ask you. They might ask you about Adobe Photoshop. They might ask you about PowerPoint. They might ask you about a different accounting software, like maybe QuickBooks or Peachtree or some other program that they use. Maybe it's a CAD program, depending on the job. So it's not necessarily Excel. It is the program that's associated with your career path. And the reason that they ask you that is they want to find out what you can do in that program. Most people know the basics of a program, but can they do anything more than the basics? So depending upon what program it is, Excel, Photoshop, Peachtree, QuickBooks, Microsoft Office, any of the platforms, you want to make sure that you're able to answer the examples of the functions and the ways to get through the program and be able to give examples of that work during your interview. Now, in some cases, they actually may test you, do a software test on whatever program it is that they're asking you to be able to know how to do. So remember, if you say that you can do something on your resume or on your LinkedIn profile, you need to be able to tell the person what your level of proficiency is with those items. And then be honest. If you say, I learned that I learned that function or I learned that tool, then maybe you need to say, I need a refresher course on this. I would want to go to lynda.com, or I would want to go to some of the other software that we have available and do a little refresher course. Chelsea, would you mind putting the link in the chat pod for everybody about how they can go to Illinois WorkNet and find the different tools that are available? So watch for that link when Chelsea puts that up. Next, what we are going to talk about, tools for the software where people can go out and learn more digital, the digital tools page, digital literacy page. All right, next question. Please think about your most significant accomplishment. So you're thinking about your most significant accomplishment. The person is going to say, now could you tell me all about it? What they're wanting there is they're wanting details. And Terry gave me this question, and I'm going to read to you what she wants when she's getting that answer from you. What she wants to know about the accomplishment is, and I'm going to read as fast as I can, a complete description of the accomplishment, the company you worked for and what it did, the actual results achieved, numbers, facts, changes made, details, amounts. When did it take place? How long did it take? The importance of this accomplishment to the company, your title and role, why you were chosen to do that accomplishment, the 3 to 4 biggest challenges you faced and how you dealt with them, a few examples of leadership and initiative, some of the major decisions made, the environment and resources available, how you made more resources available, the technical skills needed to accomplish the objective, the technical skills learned and how long it took to learn them, the actual role you played, the team involved, and all of the reporting relationships, some of the biggest mistakes you made, how you changed and grew as a person, what you would do differently if you could do it again, aspects of the project you truly enjoyed, aspects you didn't especially care about, the budget available and your role in preparing it and managing it, how you did on the project versus the plan, how you developed the plan, how you motivated and influenced others with specific examples to prove your claims, how you dealt with conflict and specific examples, anything else you felt was important to the success of the project. That one question, and I'm tired from just reading those, this one question tells Terry whether they are in it for the team or for themselves, how they organize, how they resolve conflict, how they prioritize, how they push through obstacles to win. So knowing your accomplishment and making sure that you're not sharing trade secrets, share as many of those details. I would make sure that I had something in writing that you might be able to share, perhaps a portfolio. On Illinois WorkNet, in the resume building tool, we have the ability to add portfolio information so that if you need to refer somebody to tools and programs that you've done, that would be a great place for you to store some of these items. Michelle just put a great example about she developed a reading program to link inmates to their children, fostering parental relationships and literacy. That's a great example. Now, just Terry, the interviewer, would want to know all of the details about it, what kind of budget you had, all of those things that I listed off earlier. So make sure that when you're ready to go with those things, that you've got those kind of details at the ready or at your fingertips. Next question. What makes you a better candidate than everyone else? This is a little bit of a tricky question. And Warren is a great human resources person that I know. When Warren asks this question, he's careful to make sure they are not just overconfident and boastful. A qualified candidate should be able to express why they are the best candidate and what they will offer the company. He's also cautious about not ruling out the quiet but great worker. This is also a question that can be rephrased and used while checking references. So this question, what that comment just said was, if I'm calling your references and I ask your boss or your HR person what makes John a better candidate than all of my other people, then John should be able to answer and give me the information that I'm looking for. Let's go on to the next question. If you are offered this job, how could you transform the role? So that question, oh, goodness gracious. How could you transform the role? First of all, you'd need to know what was already happening, which means that you'd have to know a little bit about the company itself. The person that asks you this question wants you to bring something exciting and new to their team, something that makes you stand out from the crowd. This person only recruits the best, and the people that they recruit always communicate how they intend on understanding, mastering, and improving the role. The interviewer wants the candidate to show ambition, drive, innovative thinking, and above all, passion. If you don't have the passion, they're wasting their time. This is very important that you do some research, that you understand what it is that the position is going to require and entail. Now, if it's a replacement position, somebody that you're taking their place, you might want to ask a couple of clarifying questions. If it's a brand new position, you can dream and share those dreams with everybody to whom you're talking to. All right. Just a few more. Let's go on to the next question here. Christine asked this question. Tell me about a time that you made a mistake at work. What was it? How was it discovered? How did you resolve the issue? And what did you learn from it? Oh, goodness, that's a big question. And the reason they ask that question is they want to see if you will take ownership for the error. If you caught it, or if someone else had to find the mistake. And if somebody else had to find the mistake, were you truthful about the fact that you did it? Now, this comes into play a lot with work ethics. And we've got our workplace skills. We've got workplace skills on our website. Chelsea or Scarlett, if you can add that link in there. This helps you find information about how to deal with workplace skills. And work ethics is one of those. And communicating is another one. Now, here's something that happened to me many years ago, maybe about 15 or 20 years ago. I came out of private sector work, and I went to work for a government agency. My boss said, go and get 40 copies of this printed in color. I didn't realize that with government, you needed to get items procured, free bids, all of those different things. And I went to the closest Kinko's and had the documents printed and bound, and it cost a whole lot more than the person thought it was going to cost. Well, what I learned from that was to ask questions. How would you like me to do this? Who's your favorite bidders? What's our budget for this? So just knowing how do you resolve it and what do you learn from it. So again, communication was a key tool with this one. You need to make sure that you learn, ask questions before you dive off into a project. Sometimes that adage of do now and ask for forgiveness later doesn't always work. Sometimes you need to ask permission first. Let's go on to the next question. The next question on our screen is, why should I hire you over your competition? Woohoo! Michelle asks this question. And Michelle says this throws people off all the time. It throws them off balance. How frequently have you gone to, let's do a raise of hands or show of hands. How often have you gone to an interview and you don't know how many other people are interviewing? Is that a yes from everybody? You don't know. So here's the question. You don't know what your competition is. So you don't know what you don't know, right? You have no idea who your competition is for the job. Their background, what the competition's background is, or how the competition interviewed. It allows the interviewer, Michelle, to see if they're going to give a lame answer. It's close to home. If they can think fast on their feet, if it takes them a couple of minutes to gather their thoughts and then come up with a great answer. It also allows the person, the interviewer, to see if the interviewee has been paying attention to what the company does and the questions that Michelle's been asking so that they can wrap that all up into a great response that matches their background. Now, this brings up a great point. If you don't have an immediate answer, you do not have to just start talking. Say, let me think about that for a second. And then think about a really good example. Then answer the question. I think that would give you much better response with the interviewer than if you just go headlong into an answer. I know I'm one of those kind of headlong kind of people, but sometimes, again, if you just listen, think before you open your mouth, and then give them a great answer, that would be a great way to answer that question. And I like what Michelle just said. She's passionate about education, and if she doesn't have the information she needs for a project, then I research until I have the information I need. So that's kind of one of those things. Maybe you just have to do the research in your head, but you do need to make sure that you've got the research going for these questions. All right, last question in our presentation today. You've got 2 minutes left to ask me anything you want to. What's it going to be? So this is the ultimate killer question that this interviewer asks, because it could be the difference between securing the role or not. This person has said it before. They'll say it again. It is absolutely essential to say yes and ask something worthwhile that you've researched about the company. If you don't ask any questions, it illustrates that you don't want to know anything else about the business and you're not interested enough to carry on the conversation. Think about what you want to ask and use it to your advantage. For example, if you know the business has just launched a new product, show that you've done your research. Tell them and ask about it. What are your plans for product X? These last few minutes is your closer. Use the time to sell yourself and why you're the perfect person for the role. You always need to have a killer interview question that you're going to ask about the company. One article that I read, and you can ask this in addition to the question about the company. Bill Freeberg wrote this in an article for a national publication. And he said, ask the interviewer, especially if it's going to be your supervisor. Here's the question. Imagine that you've hired me and it's a year down the road. I'm going to be getting my review. what will I have done right? Now, the reason why you ask this question is because it puts in their mind that, yes, you're a good worker, yes, they've hired you, yes, you've got the skills and qualifications that they want, yes, you've done a good job, and it's going to give you the insight to what they really want to accomplish, not just what the job description says. So make sure that you're taking notes during the answer that they give you. And Todd asks a great question here. What do you see the role of this position in moving the organization forward? You can have your opinion, but you want to hear what they say. So asking all of those things are really good ideas. Beverly said you should ask at least 3 good questions. It's all about researching information about the company. Great point. So let's go on. This is our last slide. Let me go see if I missed any questions. And we've got, are you able to bring notes to an interview for yourself? Oh, I would. I would definitely have a binder or an iPad. One person said, even if you bring an iPad into an interview, whether you open it or not, it shows that you are technologically advanced. So if you had some points on a Word document or in a notepad on a tablet or an iPad or even on your smartphone, you could open that up and just reference it during your interview. I think that's a great way to use that for yourself as well as to show a little bit to the interviewer. Now, I'm going to butcher this name, but one of our listeners wrote this one. I am a structural engineer and have 25 years of experience in India and 10 years experience in the U.S. In my resume, I show only U.S. experience, but during the interview, this person tells if there is some reference of experience related to India. After that, most of the time I found that employer is not interested anymore. I think employer prefers younger folks. Do you have any suggestions to deal with this type of situation? Well, on your resume, you can always add bullet points at the top of your resume that include those experiences that you had in India. Make sure that they are just bullet points, and then try to make sure that you are restricting your experience and your references just to work, not that it was in this country or this country. Just make sure that you have the reference, but eliminate the geographical recommendation. All right. So that's it for our presentation today. Do we have any other questions? Remember that you can download the handouts. I'm going to switch over to our closing screen. The chat pod will go with us, but I see Arlene typing, so I'm going to give it just a second. All right, how would you suggest we prepare for a group interview? Oh my goodness, group interviews are the worst. But one thing that I've noticed about group interviews in my experience is that they have a list of questions that they're going to ask, and they just take turns answering or asking you the questions. What I would do during that interview is I would primarily address the person that asked you the question, but catch eye contact with everybody else while you're answering that question. Because what they want to see is they want to see whether or not you can handle a group presentation. Now, I'm in marketing and I do a lot of public speaking, so I'm pretty comfortable with that sort of a situation. But somebody who sits behind a desk and works on a CAD program may not have that same level of comfort. So what you need to do in that situation is you need to make sure that you're at least talking to, directly, catching eye contact with the person that asked you the question. Did that answer your question, Arlene? Great. All right. Well, I really and truly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I hope you all picked up a nugget or two about interviewing and answering those tough questions. Just remember, in general, it's how they phrase the question. They're not necessarily trying to trip you up. They just want to see how you're going to answer, how you have mentally or sometimes physically prepared for